Okay. Good evening. We're late because I was distracted. No, I got distracted getting on time to see you. Okay. So maybe it's one thing to think about is to get less distracted. So that's the topic tonight. We missed last month. What happened last month? I forgot. I got overwhelmed, I think. Or something, yeah. No, I was leaving. I was going out anyway. So just to set a motivation, that's one of the things that helps with being distracted. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Is to set a motivation for why we're here. It's not usually what we do in normal life, but we always have an intention. Intention is one of the 5 mental factors that's always there. There's 5 mental factors that are constantly present, even when we're asleep, and one of them is intention. So it's interesting. So it's not so much like motivation. There's always a motivation or intention that drives us to everything we do. But we're typically not very conscious, but we can be. So we can, what's the word? We can transform that motivation by just being more conscious of it. So intention has a lot to do with results. In fact, intention is sometimes referred to as, and we won't go into this is a whole other area, but in terms of when we think about mental imprints, which is a way of talking about karma. They talk about karmic imprints. Well, really, karmic imprints are mental imprints. So mental imprints are formulated all the time because intention is always there. And intention is sometimes considered the karmic imprints. So that means we can shift it. But typically, we're just unconscious. So what we can do is in this activity, for example, we do with any activity, but just this activity of being in this class for a little while is just to set an intention, and then it'll pervade for the 2 hours or however long we're together here. So you can make that decision on your own, what kind of intention. The one I choose, or we could say it's the Mahayana Buddhist, which is centers of Mahayana Buddhist center, is the motivation that is primary for us is to motivate that we're going to be in this class listening, learning, contemplating for the purpose of developing our own mental health, which means ultimately developing an awakened mind. And that what makes it especially powerful is to think that, well, I'm not just generating that mind for my own worth, but also so that I can be of worth to others. Because actually, we're not really that beneficial to others when we don't have a mind that's balanced and awakened. So that's the way it works. Okay? So if you can just sort of set your intention that way, that the 2 hours or the hour and a half that we're together motivate that whatever happens, it's for the welfare of developing the awakening mind within myself, in order that I may be of ultimate greatest benefit to others. Okay, so just think like that for a moment. So now you begin to train the mind that way. Okay. So we've been doing these classes for a while. I don't know how long now. Maybe a year? Yeah? Yeah. And it's a challenge because, challenge for me. It has to do with my own personal belief and mission that Buddhist ideas, which primarily are, when we talk about Buddhism, we're talking about 2/3 of the entire Buddhist teachings are really around psychology. Okay. So typically when we're studying Buddhist psychology, Buddhist philosophy, we're going at it from a Buddhist psychological philosophical outline, right? Or right? And as opposed to coming from the other side, it's like, well, if it's a psychology, then the whole purpose of it is to help my mind become more healthy. I don't think there's a psychology without a therapy. Do you know what I mean? There could be. I haven't found one yet. Usually there could be a theory that develops of psychology, and then what happens is then a therapy or an intervention develops around that. But I don't know if there's a purely theoretical body of psychology without some sort of intervention that has grown out of that, So that's the same with Buddhist psychology. Like as I said, it's very, very vast. It's very big, very broad, hundreds and hundreds of volumes of text on this topic. So it's pretty fascinating. So it's going to be fascinating. It's just now happening in the last really 10 years that these Buddhist psychology, it happened before, but where it's really become more mainstream or more integrated in the university and study, where these psychological teachings are being sort of researched in much more depth. So that's great. My own background was I was involved in these ideas since 1975 when I went to live in Nepal. And I lived in a monastery for 12, 13 years. I was not a monk. And so that's where I became in touch with these ideas. And at that time, when I came back from being over there, I went in 1975, came back in 1988, and then was started to enter my degree program, a master's in clinical psych. And then it was I had to be very, it was very private. People didn't, I worked up at Stanford for 3 years, and it was like, I felt I had to be sort of the closet Buddhist, because it wasn't, maybe it was my own paranoia, but, it wasn't so common then. That was 1990 something. Okay, so but now it's much more open, and so this class that you're involved in is a lot about my own discovery around these ideas, because I was educated by Lama Yeshe, was my root teacher, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and Lama Yeshe is the Lama on the left, up to your left up here, and his belief was that these teachings they're universal, so we need to sort of try and extract the universality of these ideas as opposed to just bringing Tibetan Buddhism. Now, this is a Tibetan Buddhist center because that way we have the pure transmission. Can't change it at will. That's not allowed. But now, once a complete transmission is happening, then we can begin to analyze it and see, what is the universality, what's the modern way of expressing some of these ideas and stuff without changing the core and heart of the ideas. That's very important. People are changing the core ideas. So anyway, I try not to, but it's an experiment. So we talk about distractions. When we talk about the idea of distraction, this is a big topic. We could say any topic is, but this one I really had especially. It wasn't difficult. It was difficult trying to distill and narrow down what it was to present, because, in a sense, everything in Buddhist practice, in Buddhist psychology, in Buddhist, the articulation of what is our condition, what is our problem that we're trying to get out of, is really entirely almost about distraction. So I asked Margaret, well, what were people asking for when they said talk about distraction? I kind of had an idea. It was like sort of everyday conversation about distraction, right? I'm guessing that's why. But you can't talk about the everyday present day condition. It's kind of like, well, distraction is more of a problem now than it was 15 years ago. I think people would kind of say that. It's like almost being asked about talk about that. And you can't just talk about that. I can't. You have to go to the core. So the core is, if we just talk about that sort of surface level distraction, like I look at my smartphone too much. Okay? That's because of my training and because I'm so I don't know what the word is, but that I can't just stop there. It's like I've been a therapist for a long time, and even now, in recent years, I prefer to work. I've gotten a little bit more selective. I'm maybe coming a little more towards the end of that career, in terms of seeing people in an office setting, where I really am much more interested in working with people's problems from a Buddhist foundation. I can't separate my thinking from that, which doesn't mean they have to be Buddhist. Doesn't mean I even mention the word Buddhism. That I'm not saying that. I don't do that. It depends on the person. But what it does mean is when someone wants to talk about working out some sort of problem, like being distracted by, his cell phone, or mom maybe comes in and says, like, my son's driving me crazy because he won't put his phone down. I can't approach that problem anymore from the old stance of, where you need boundaries and limits, and I just, there is a way to deal with it. There is a way, and there's many present day therapists who probably are developing strategies to work with that. I'll just warn you, that's not my approach. I can't kind of do that anymore. Okay, even though it could be skillful, right? But it's just my own attachment to. I want to go deeper. I want to I'm much more interested in, and I hope you are, is what is the thing driving? What's the mindset that drives someone to pick up their cell phone and look at it every couple minutes? What is the mindset that gets people lost in Facebook? What is the mindset that gets people to watch TV hour after hour? I'm more interested. So what's the mindset that gets young people to play video games where they don't even sleep? I'm more interested in that. I find it difficult to just help people create the boundaries around that. Now, I can do that. I'm just talking about my own personal belief, by the way. But I'm not sure that leads to solutions. So solution has to come from, because these are mental issues, aren't they? They're mental, emotional issues. Someone playing video games all day, from my point of view, has to do with a mental, emotional foundation. So let's look there. That's just my own bias. That's all. I'm not saying I'm right. Maybe it's not even helpful. So when so hyperactivity, or distraction, someone's ready to, we know a little bit just from the common culture about people who are ADHD or ADD. They're not exactly the same, right? ADHD is the hyperactive part of being distracted. There's the non-hyperactive attention deficit disorder, and it's a real thing. It's not like something just made up by the medical community. Although it is too, that. But so is everything else, right? Not by the medical. So I had the great fortune of working in the ADHD clinic, or the ADD clinic at Stanford. Well, at the Children's Health Council, which is the psychological assessment division of Stanford Hospital, I guess it is, that and is just assessments for people under the 18 and under 18 years. In other words, I don't want to say children, but adolescents and children. So I was there for 3 years doing assessments, helping with these assessments. And part of that time, I was specializing or spending my time in the ADD clinic. Lots of people coming in to have their kids assessed for ADD. And the interesting thing for me is I had a very very open-minded supervisor. And she felt way back then that this was a bit of a political diagnosis. There's a lot of politics around it, not the diagnosis. There's a lot of politics around it. Meaning that, you see, I don't know about now, because I'm kind of out of touch with what's going on, but a lot of people wanted their children to have the diagnosis so that they could have an individual educational plan. In other words, so they could not have to take time tests, so they could have more different way of approaching homework, things like that. And so they needed the diagnosis because their kids were struggling for whatever reason in order to perform in those environments. Now, the interesting thing is how we went to that problem that children might be having to then talking about a mental disorder. That's a really interesting description. Isn't that interesting? Because if you're a religious person, maybe then you're going to articulate it in a different way, right? Maybe, who knows? But depending on what your belief system is, then you're going to make sense of it according to your belief system. And our belief system here in at least the United States and West modern world has a lot to do with science and medicine and that sort of thing. So what are you going to do? Freud wanted to be legitimate. So he didn't, I don't think he really started off seeing psychology as a medical science or discipline, but he wanted to fit in. In Austria in those days, when medicine was blooming, starting to really take off, he wanted to be legitimate. So he designed a form of language to explain probably what is more of a spiritual issue, a spiritual discipline in medical terms. That's what happened. Even today, a lot of my therapist friends are really almost more taking a spiritual approach than a medical approach. Now, Stanford was the epitome of the medical model, and is. So it was really good for me because I didn't agree with it. So now I agree with it in some, knowing that it's just a context, right? It's just a particular narrative to fit people's view of the world. The sad part is not about Stanford. The sad part is that our view of the world is becoming much and much more material, objective, scientific, descriptive in that way. Okay? Why am I going off on this? I don't know. I'm only on the first slide. Okay. That's fascinating. Oh, my point was, so my supervisor was quite progressive. And so we found that many of the kids coming in for an assessment had already received the diagnosis. And they needed, I don't know why there were different reasons why they came into Stanford. Sometimes the parents didn't want the diagnosis. They didn't trust, maybe it was a school psychologist or a doctor who gave the diagnosis, I don't know. So they wanted to kind of get a professional, robust assessment done. Other parents had children who didn't get the diagnosis, but wanted the diagnosis for whatever reason, whether for school purposes or just a way of explaining their children's behavior, or they just many different reasons. So then those are also the other category of people who came for the assessment. Very interesting. What percentage do you think? So these are really probably a high. This is a very specific population of children, right? That are coming into there to get assessed. What do you think was, in the end, was an average, what percent of children received the diagnosis of ADD? 90%. You think 90%? Mm-hmm. Anyone else? My supervisor was not popular. 5%. She was not popular because she saw what was happening. And if we said children are not performing in school, they can't sit still because the classrooms are too big, or the teachers are too under pressure to get through a curriculum so that they can meet the standards, or someone at home is not paying attention to the child, so at school they're looking for attention. Those could be reasons, right? But those don't fit the model, do they? If you need a medical model and a diagnosis, those don't really fit. Well, she was in touch with that. She was really into context. Okay? And so we got a lot of people that were really upset with us because it wasn't the first. Now, some kids did receive it as a secondary diagnosis, but not the primary one. Primary one might have been depression, might have been anxiety, might have been homeless, whatever. So the point is that, isn't that interesting? There's context to why they were distracted. But that's being lost still in the conversation, because I think that Ritalin, I think I'm wrong, but it used to be the most prescribed medication. We could look that up in American culture. It is Ritalin, the most prescribed, yeah. So there you go. There's a lot of reason for that. So let me just continue. I will take questions, I promise. If you expand that, now let's expand that a little bit. Now we're expanding into, of course, adult ADD, right? Which, by the way, traditionally the diagnosis is only for children. But there's this whole population that might be needing it and they are distracted. People are distracted, okay? So keep that in mind. Why are we distracted? So let's go at it from a different point of view. First of all, we have to accept whether or not people are distracted or not, right? Every untrained mind is both attentionally deficit and hyperactive. So I'm going to tell you right now, we all get the diagnosis. Okay? It's maybe degree, but we all get the diagnosis. It's maybe some people have the diagnosis, but their social skills are such that they can maintain a facade at work where they're not getting, and they're not jumping off their seat every 5 minutes. But there are adults who can't sit still, right? Who can't focus, can't seem to, definitely. But is it a medical problem? Is it a genetic issue? Okay, so we start looking at causes, and then sometimes causes are different. Is it cause or condition? We once, one of the really interesting approaches we took, I mean, it is really fascinating where we had this ADD clinic, and this supervisor was also a student of narrative therapy, which was what we were doing. It was then very cutting edge therapy, not very popular amongst the medical establishment because it wasn't. It located problems in the way people describe and create their the social messages that they grew up with. In other words, a perfect example for me was living in Nepal for 12 years. On Sundays, if you wanted to go see the clairvoyant in the middle, you want to go get some advice from the clairvoyant, you go on Sunday because she'd go into trance on Sundays. And then you could ask her because deity was there. You ask, she would disappear and you were asking the deity. But you see the context, the description. The narrative was that she was a, what do you call it? Like a medium. What's the other word? Oracle. So she was actually quite revered. Now, if she was here, right? It's just the narrative, the context. We would describe her differently. Okay? So we were talking. So we used to interview. So we told this one, I think it was 8-year-old boy. We said, we're really trying to learn about ADD or ADHD, and we don't know much about. We think you're an expert because you have the diagnosis. So we think you're the expert. So we'd like to interview you. It's very fascinating. But when we interview you, we would like to interview ADD. So can we do that with you? Can you be ADD? He's sure. Kids loved it. I mean, it's like, and so, okay, so we were interviewing, and I don't remember. All of this was recorded too, video recorded. But anyway, the main thing I remember is when we asked, so Mr. ADD, what is it you want? What do you think he said? What do you think ADD said? Yes, I want attention. Why? Because I don't get enough. Attention deficit disorder. Not enough attention. Now that was for that boy, but it made sense. You know, he was struggling in school. He had learned differently. The teacher didn't have time. She was overwhelmed. So what, he would get frustrated. He would get out from his seat. He would, whatever, because he needed attention. And the saying that, particularly with children, they'll accept negative attention over no attention. Okay, so it's a different way of thinking about it. Rather than medically, let's give him a pill. Because a pill will take care of the symptoms of what's the causes. Now, from Buddhist psychology point of view, this is where we're going to now diverge from the Western model, is that every untrained mind is both attentionally deficit and hyperactive. Okay? If we were to make a decision to focus for 1 hour on a topic of your choice, on an object of your choice, right? Just an object. You have to choose an object. I'll let you choose one. And not reading and stuff. I mean, you're just going to focus on it, like your breath, or your childhood home, or your best friend, or love and compassion, the feeling. And I asked you, forget an hour, that you to focus on that for 15 minutes without distraction. Could you do it? Not if you've tried. Some people say, yeah, that's easy. And it's like, we can't do it because the mind isn't trained to do that. The mind is trained to watch television. The mind is trained to drive down the street. But when we're driving to the center, I know you're not, but don't be mistaken, you're very distracted. Right? Ever have that experience like, wait, whoa, did I just, God, this 15 minutes just went by like nothing, right? So distraction is the norm. Okay? For example, I often talk about this too. If I asked you just to stay without moving, okay, in your position that you're in now, how long could you stay like that? Not very long, right? We always got to move, particularly mentally. Okay? I like this by William James. He says, for the moment, what we attend to is reality. He's not saying that's what reality is. He says whatever we attend to is reality. So, if you want to change your reality, attend to something different. Right? What if you want your reality to be kindness, beauty, contentment, positive, one of those positive qualities, virtues. Okay? Or, in terms of looking externally, seeing people as kind, seeing people as suffering, seeing people as needing, seeing people, whatever. You can, if reality is what we attend to in the moment, why don't we attend to something different that's more wholesome? Any answers to that? It's actually a question. Why don't we? Habit. Mm-hmm. Amazing, isn't it? I think habit's a good answer. Then now we can add something to that. If I said to you, okay, well, I could say, do you like that habit? And you would say probably, no, it's not my choice, but it's habit, right? Then I could say to you, well, why don't you stop it? right? That's kind of where we're at. Do you know what I mean? Now, some people don't know it's habit. Most people. And some people kind of, a light goes off for them in their life, and they go, I have these habitual tendencies that are not helpful, not healthy, not happy, whatever. And then they're faced with the next problem, which is they can't change them. Or they try to change them. They do change slowly. It's very slow. But then you don't have all the methodology, right? Like, how do I do this? How do I change my obsession with politics? I was never obsessed before. I can't get out of my mind, right? Then that one you kind of work, and then you got another one. So, this precious human life, which many of us don't even really capture or aware of. I mean, people know, I think everyone knows in their heart that this human life is something extremely, I mean, there's nothing more precious. But we don't act that way, do we? I mean, we don't act that way. We don't realize it's slipping away. I mean, we get flashes that it's slipping away. You know, when you start, gray hair, or a friend of yours or someone passes away. And you go, wow, where'd that go? Wow, I remember playing baseball with him. And now he's gone. But that's not really the reality, is that it's slipping away right now. It's slipping away in this instant. When at the end of our life, guess what? It's going to feel just like now. We're going to be as unaware as we are at this moment. If we were to suddenly realize we're dying in this hour, we'd be surprised, right? I'm young, I'm not, like that. You don't feel any differently. I mean, for the most part, sorry, it can be exceptional. For the most part, you don't feel any differently when you're 80, 85, 90. As long as you're healthy, relatively mentally healthy. You feel it's today. You're not approaching like, oh, I'm going to die today. Oh, I'm going to die today. Life's slipping away. I mean, you do hear from older people that they have a different perspective, which is very valuable. You do. Because they can't, escape it. But so the reason it's slipping away is we don't really understand at all what true happiness is. So now we're in probably a little bit of an issue of why do we let it slip away? Why do we let it slip away? Why aren't we more vigilant? Why aren't we more anxious? It's because, isn't it funny? Here we are, human beings, and what it comes down to is, if we knew what happiness really was, we would be more vigilant. But what happens for the most of us is that there's this default happiness. Like you said, habit. There's this habit. Oh, I just do that. My whole life I just do that. Without questioning. Okay? So we have a misconception of what happiness is. Because we don't know any better. It's not like our fault. That becomes the spiritual, that's when someone becomes a spiritual person, is when they become very concerned with what happiness really is, in terms of a conscious way. Everyone wants happiness, so it's not like wanting it isn't the issue. It's about being conscious about one's happiness. Okay? Being conscious about it, and if we're conscious about it, eventually we get led to the fact that happiness is based upon an internal mindset. Okay? State of mind. But it's amazing. And even then, people say, yeah, that's right. And then you go, well, what are you doing about it? Well, I'm trying to live my life to the fullest. And it's kind of sad, right? It's people, yeah, it's a state of mind. So what are you doing about it? It's like even you people say, okay, well, if we said to somebody, oh, it's a state of mind. Okay, so from now on, you'll be happy, right? Make a decision. It's just a state of mind. It's not about how much money I have. It's not about what kind of relationships. It's not what kind of food, what country. It's a state of mind. But we don't do. We can't. I mean, most of us don't take accountability for that. Now, if we know that and start taking accountability and then slowly practice, that's fine. Because it's not something that can be done instantly. It might take a whole lifetime for sure to change that mindset. Because that mindset that thinks this is happiness has been around forever. We've been duped. So if you want to know what distractions are, so so if the mindset, if happiness is a mindset, right? Are we in agreement? Anyone disagree? Anyone watching disagree? No? Anyone watching? Yeah. So isn't that interesting? So I'm going to say something here. I'm going to say that the reason we don't adhere to the mindset, the state of mind of happiness, is because we're distracted. How about that? Because even I'll know that a peaceful, contented mind is really when I'm happiest. So why aren't I there all the time? Habit. Habit of distraction. We're driven by distraction. Yeah. So one way of talking about distractions, so what are these distractions? So this is just one way of articulating in Buddhist psychology. If we try to meditate on that one object, the mind will get distracted, correct? Yes.
Well, my mind is creating the distraction.
Yes.
Unbidden.
On what?
Unbidden.
Yes. I agree. We're under control. You had a question earlier, sorry.
I forgot what. Blaming on my years. But no, I was thinking about that people who have been on the edge of life.
People on the edge of life. I'm supposed to repeat the question, sorry. I will repeat yours, and I'll go back to yours in a second.
Get an answer? Oh, okay.
Well, there's no answer. It's just like, it's not like these
It's
things
unbidden.
coming from anywhere else. It's not like, oh, I have these 10 things that are distractions. It's just, it's like this fire that flares up.
Right.
And it seems like it's out of my control.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's being produced right here.
Yeah, it's being produced right here, she's saying, in my head or in my mind. Yeah, and we'll talk about that. Yeah. Maybe that should have been that slide. Well, the organization of these slides, you have to forgive me, because this is the first time I've done this distraction one. So, every slide is perfect in itself. But I can't say they flow together.
So people on the edge of life, no matter what page they are, it shifts them in some way.
On the edge of life, yeah.
Right, and
Yeah.
so they get to examine, where they're at,
Mm-hmm.
and they're more aware, and I think it's easier for some of them to be able to look at something for 15 minutes.
Yeah. So on the edge of life, she's saying that people have maybe begin to look at. They have that experience itself creates a situation where they begin to look at life and their mind differently, and that perhaps they could even concentrate better.
Yeah, they just grab life in a different way.
They grab life in a different way. So this is not this course, but we have another course on death and dying that we do. And isn't it interesting, that person that you're mentioning, that hypothetical, well, all of us, on the edge of death, or had near-death experience or something like that, feels the closeness of death. Do you know that actually that person's experience of the closeness of death is normal, but we don't experience normal? In other words, we are as close to death right now as that person. But there's a lack of awareness. So we say, the meditators who meditate on these topics, in particular one of them being death and dying, when they attain this heightened awareness, they're aware of death on their shoulder. It's always there. That's why they live life to the fullest. They appreciate it. It doesn't make you depressed. It makes you awestruck. Because we're not aware of death, we're distracted. Actually. Because we think this will make us happy or that will make us happy. And then like you said, it just happens without my bidding. Well, that's true. But one can take control. After you hear this class, if you didn't know that before, you're going to know it now, and then you can't unhear it. And then you're responsible. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of a curse. So if you don't want the curse, you better leave.
We're all leaving.
Yeah, because it is a kind of a curse. Yes?
But what if being perpetually aware of the reality of death is in itself distracting?
Being aware of death can be distracting. I can see the point there, but that's because people who might be hyper aware of death are not aware of a lot of things maybe not aware of. Because if you're hyper aware of death, then it should motivate us to do something.
But wouldn't it be more like a noose perpetually hanging around your neck?
Yeah, because that's a noose perpetually hanging around your neck. Yeah, but that's not actually with a complete understanding of death, because really understanding the imminent nature of death is also to understand the preciousness of this life. So it's just a fact. It doesn't mean we have to be depressed. It doesn't mean you have to be obsessed. It's just a fact. There's gravity. Are we depressed by gravity? I mean, it's kind of a bummer we can't float around, right? But it's a fact. So the imminence of death is a fact. It's just a fact, just like air. But people who become obsessed with it, that's different. The obsession is different because has a lot to do with the way of. It's just different. I could explain it, but you have to come to that class. It has to do with attachment. Because being aware of our imminent death is not all that there is, just because we're aware of that, right? That's, I think, what happens when they become obsessed with the imminence of death. But there's many, many other qualities of reality. The other one is the preciousness of this life is like a miracle. This life is unbelievably precious. I can't explain it. I can't explain it. So that normally is the reaction of someone who's aware of death. Because, death is just a fact. So people get depressed is a different story, or get obsessed. It's a different story. That's something different. Do you follow me? So it has to do with using the death awareness, the fact, for positive purpose, not for negative. I understand me. And there are a lot of people today sort of existentially the meaninglessness of life because of the quality of death. That's something that has been happening. I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but that's something that has been developing. We had a friend of our family, young guy. He was probably about, I don't know how old he was, maybe 25. He was really obsessed with this existential meaninglessness of life, and he hung himself. But that's not all there is, the meaninglessness of life. I mean, there's also meaning in life. There's many other things. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but I do get it. It has to do with not having the full picture around what to do with that awareness. It's not just the awareness alone that counts. You follow me? Do you want to elaborate?
Yes, I think I do get your point.
Yeah, we can talk about more. It was a question I've never had before, so I have to think about it. But there are definitely, but it makes sense. There are people who obsess with death and get depressed, right? It becomes meaningless, but that's different. That's with a strong sense of self-grasping. So the meditators that are focused on death are doing the opposite. They're loosening that sense of self-grasping, self-cherishing. So that's what's different. Okay, it's in the context of full context of a spiritual path. So we talk about the awareness of death has to be within the context of a spiritual path. So in this context, spiritual path means to be understanding reality and understanding the nature of the self-grasping and the self-cherishing and the selfishness, and how those are problematic. Those are the real problems in life of happiness. Anyway, I feel like I kind of glossed over your question, but it's important. Okay, thanks. About distractions. So, I don't know if I want to go through these 8 because I don't want to get bogged down in too much technique or theory, rather. The point of this is that the mind is tricked in that it thinks that if I do these 8 things or any combination there, that's what brings me happiness. So, for example, just take number 3. Reputation, prestige, esteem. Okay? So in this case, most people are concerned about achievement, right? That's especially in this culture more than many others. The achievement to be, especially in this area, right? You're not making enough money, you got to live with roommates, such a loser, things like that. Or I got to move out of state, not getting promotions. I got a bad job review. I'm not sure I'm going to get it. I got passed over for a promotion. The younger guy got it instead of me. I mean, people, right? Do people stress about this or not? That's a distraction. That's an example of a distraction. And if I said to you, including myself, by the way, I'm not putting myself in either. Okay, now meditate this morning. Or go meditate, right? You have someone at work who's accusing you of cheating and, not doing your job well. Or you have so many examples. I don't know what work you do. But if you work with people, there's many strange people out there, and someone accuses you of something that is way out there and you have no idea, but then all of a sudden they say, well, I have a case and I'm going to sue you. Right? By the way, your trees are blocking our view. I asked if you would move them. You said you don't cut trees, so, we're going to take you to court. That's just a small thing, right? That doesn't even go into the newspaper. What happens to the mind?
It's agitated.
It's so agitated, right? So I'm going to say, so that's Margaret. Let's say Margaret shared that with me. I say, Margaret, don't, just go meditate, okay? Just watch your breath. What happens? Can you do it? And then you know what she does? She said, Karuna, he told me to watch my breath. I started to, and I realized, that's crazy. I got to get on the phone and get a hold of my lawyer. What a waste. I appreciate Karuna saying that, but he's a little out of touch. People say this all the time, right? I would, but because we don't know where the unhappiness comes from, the problem. The problem is not the neighbor not cutting the trees. The problem is the mind that's obsessed with that and seeing it in that way. Or with your work situation, you're not getting your reputation, you're not getting compliments, you're not getting praise, you're getting criticism, right? So if you really look at when you're distracted, pull these out and see which one of these is grabbing you. Okay? Everyone worries about loss and poverty and debt, don't they? Almost everyone, all of us. How we live our life, where our income comes from, we will think about this. So Urs makes his money, I'm making this up, he makes his money from the stock market. So he knows that you should get up early and meditate, right? But what does he do? Oh, Karuna, I meditate at night because the stock market's closed. Right? Right? So why can't he meditate in the morning? Because he's got his finger on the that app he has, stock market app. Okay? All kinds of things. So just check for yourself. When you can't meditate, when you can't focus, look and see what it is. Okay? Is this one of us? Anybody do that? So I'm not going to go into this, but I want to point out, and I can't remember his name. That's not good. But there's a TED Talk. Just look up, if you're into TED Talks, just Google on TED Talk. Just do a search for distractions. And there's a talk by this gentleman. Again, I apologize for not remembering his name. Who works as a design engineer, and found that, started realizing, the level of distraction that is designed into this technology. For example, how many people get text messages on their phone? How many people don't look at the text messages on their phone? Why not? Then, do you ever turn the text messages off? No. Huh. Do you know the technology is designed that way?
You can do not disturb.
You can, but do people do it? Not very. You do, yeah. The technology is designed such that, for example, on your iPad, how many of you have iPads? Or it doesn't matter. On your laptop, your iPad, how many of you, when you get on, click send, receive? To see if there's new emails. I do. When you get on and then when you're on your, if you're on your computer and you leave your mail program, do you have it set to notify you when emails come in? Yeah, I do. Yeah. So when you're working on that document, you get a little pop-up that says, It's designed that way. They're manipulating our minds. Why, Margaret? So when it pops up, do you look at it? Yes. Do you know that it takes you 3.5 minutes to get back to your task that you're doing? On average? And these guys know it. These technology people know it. And if you're working on a project, and when you're working on it, and you leave the project, like because I send you a text, and I say, where's the center? And you're texting me back, and then I say, but what's the street? And you say, what's the street? And then I text you back, and I say, what time is it again, right? Do you know that it takes you about 23 minutes to get back into your project? It can take 23 minutes. If you have 2 distractions from leaving your project, my text, and then, oh, by the way, because you don't just deal with my text, you then look to see if you have other texts, and you might have an email. Maybe Karuna emailed me, because he did say he was going to send me that doc, right? And then I forgot to send him the minutes. That's what happens. So they say on average about 23 minutes you leave your project. So this technology issue is a big one. Many, many more distractions. So there's a way, and the thing is that with the technology being designed, our values are changing. So now the values are speed. Because I get upset with my friend Neil, who just doesn't get the whole texting thing. We make plans through texting. He's going to group text. Are we going to do this, you guys? And Rich says, yeah, 9 o'clock. And Harvey says, yeah, 9 o'clock, I'll be there. And Neil doesn't respond. Right? So the culture's changing, the values are changing. Not Neil. But he's a technology guy. And Neil says, I'm not going to be slave to that. He's kind of onto it already. Okay? So technology, when it's on, you're distracted. Just do the research. It's even now, right now. I mean, you know, if I didn't have this computer, then maybe I would be more engaged or something. I don't know. But we never had it before. We would have a book maybe. We'd have a text. So when you're on, you're distracted, and when it's off, feeling left out. Right? Fear of missing out. Right? Did I get it right? Fear of missing out. Do you know that was never a fear before? But it was a fear before. Because, 30 years ago, you heard that Margaret was having a party and you didn't get an invitation. My teacher once wrote there were some meetings of some directors of our organization. This was when I was in Nepal, and I wasn't one of the directors. I kind of was a director, but I wasn't officially a director. And so I wasn't invited to the meeting. But I had to serve, make sure they had all their conditions and all that sort of thing. Their notepads and all that sort of stuff. And then, I was feeling insecure. I was feeling left out. And then one day I went up to the room where they were having the meeting I don't know what I was going to do, take some tea in there or whatever. And there was a note on the door. It was written in Lama Yeshe's own writing. And it said, "Me not included, me freak out." So he knew about FOMO back then. And then how distracting is that? So one is a distraction with the technology. Why do people look? Why do you look all the time at Facebook? Part of it has to do with fear of not being included, of missing out. I mean, for example, with me, looking at the news, I get distracted by the news. I mean, is that ridiculous that I have to look at it 3 times a day or whatever? Or, when I'm on my computer, why am I on the computer and working for this class so I go check the headlines at 2 in the afternoon? Because I'm addicted. Because I'm mindless.
Well, isn't it like activity craving? You're just craving.
Craving activity.
Stimulation.
Mm-hmm.
Something is.
Stimulation. You know why I crave stimulation?
Because I'm human.
Because I'm human. Well, humans do that. I don't. Why do I do it? Because of this. I have these are reversed. First of all, I don't know reality. But that aside, I have this constant desire to experience what I put seems like enjoyment. And I have a desire to avoid what seems unpleasant. This is important because people might say, we're all walking this class together right now, and you can see that me searching, wanting to see the headlines. If I just said at the beginning of class, people wanted to look at the headlines every 2 hours because they want to experience what's enjoyable. You say, wait, well, no, that's not enjoyable because the news is terrible. But that's not the motivation behind it. The motivation is exactly what you said, stimulation, right? Whatever. But why stimulation? Why do I? Because that is a definition, sadly, of enjoyment. I become captured by that kind of sensation as being enjoyable or not wanting to miss out. Could be that too. That's uncomfortable. What if Trump bombed Syria and I don't know about it for the next 2 hours? Right? So it's one of those two. Can you see how distracting that is? So the distraction comes from having a conception of what's enjoyable, pleasurable. And that has become synonymous with happiness. Correct? What is it that people spend their life doing, their day doing? They spend their life really trying to figure out how to have more pleasure. And I don't mean this in Playboy Mansion pleasure. I don't mean that. I mean pleasure as defined by you. Okay? Because everyone has, some people, the pleasure is sitting down quietly with a book and a cup of tea, right? Some people, it's sitting with a video game. Some people, it's meeting with friends. They don't want to sit around the house. They want to go do something. So that's really important. And what's really important is people spend some time analyzing. That's the purpose of meditation, is you analyze what drives you. And when you get down to it, I think for people, us individually, we need to come to terms with our own individual style. But what's common to all of us, every living being actually, is a desire for pleasure. Granted, a cheesecake is not pleasurable to everyone. That's not the point. It's not the object that I'm concerned about. It's not the object at all. Some people, the object is hunting and killing deer, right? But they do it because that feels like happiness. When happiness then is going to be translated by pleasure. Killing a deer is pleasurable. Well, for that person, it gives that stimulation of which he or she has been habituated and has defined or become familiar with it feeling good. Now, granted, we might say, well, that's a pretty carnal feeling of feeling good. And it is. But it's where they're at. Even a, whatever, a lion hunting a gazelle. Pretty carnal, but that's because it feels good. I mean, it's pretty weird, but that is when it comes down, because it's hungry, and hunger doesn't feel good. So we're always trying to avoid what doesn't feel good, and we're always trying to have what's enjoyable. And that's why we're distracted. And why do we think that? That first box up in the top left corner. We misperceive things. We don't know that that's not happiness. Okay? Now, maybe this crowd is a bit unusual, but generally that's how it works. That we don't know that that's not happiness. If we knew, we'd be smart and want to be happy. Okay? But we keep going after the same thing. So distracted people don't know that that's not happiness. Margaret doesn't know that the text messages that pop up on her phone are not the cause of happiness. Now, if they're not, maybe she goes, yes, Karuna, I know, quit lecturing me, right? But I'm talking about instinctively. So I'm not putting her down. Instinctively, we're acting from instinct. We're not acting from control. If she was acting from control, she would tell me, I really don't want to look at those messages. I kind of can't help it. Or it's my job. If I don't do my job, I'm going to get in trouble, right? Right? Yeah, so that goes back, by the way, number 3 there. And number 2. Isn't it funny? So if you don't look at your text messages, someone's going to criticize you, aren't they? You're not doing your job. What are you, spacing out? And so she has to look at the text messages and has to be distracted because she has to avoid the criticism and insults. And by the way, I'm not saying you should be criticizing. We know this is just the trap. We're all in this trap. And that's why they call it, you heard that word samsara. That's the meaning of samsara. Okay? It's not the world. Sometimes they talk about it as the world. It's not. It's this mentality that's spinning, all the time spinning. Get it? That's what is distraction.
What about anything repetitive like cycle? I mean,
Yeah.
people get bored and they want to see something different, new thing.
Yes.
So that's...
People get bored and want to see something new, right? So here's the problem, or here's the situation. They will get bored. All of us will get bored, right? The nature of every external source of happiness or pleasure guess what happens? Boredom. You can't show me one thing that all of us could stick to and it'll always make us happy. I mean, external thing. But we're tricked by it. So what you see is like the guy down the street from me. He started off with a jet ski in his front yard. Then the small boat. I'm not serious. Then the motorcycles. He needed a trailer for the motorcycles. Then the camper. Then the camper got bigger into one of those Winnebago things. But he's just doing what people do. You know, I'm not criticizing. Because if the jet ski gave him happiness, it would always give him happiness, right? You wouldn't need. So boredom is the natural conclusion of relying on pleasure as happiness. I'm not saying we shouldn't have pleasure, by the way, okay? Pleasure's fine. It's the belief that pleasure is happiness, equal. So Lama Yeshe used to say, you Western people don't, Western meaning modern people, you don't even know, you think spiritual Buddhist practice, I have to give up my Western lifestyle, I have to give up my car, I have to give up my nice clothes. He says, that's not it. You don't understand. You have those things. You should enjoy them. You're very lucky. But don't be attached. The measure of the attachment is that when it goes, your mind doesn't move. That's what we're trying to get to. But it's exactly as you say. The mind constantly is looking for something new to stimulate it. And a lot of people that knew it has to do with materialism, right? Some people are not that way. Some people it's good books, nice walks, good friends. They're more. Actually, you could say there are levels of contentment. One of my clients previously, I used to do some coaching here in the Valley with executives, and most of them were very, very successful. And one of my all-stars, I asked him, well, what's the goal here? And he says, well, what's your philosophy? I said. He says, well, you can have it all. And I said, how do you know when you have it all? I told you this story, right? I've said this before. He said, well, when I can afford my own jet. And he said, but it has to be, there's two kinds of jets. The ones you can't stand up fully in. But this has to be one of the ones you can stand in. Okay, so I don't know about, private jet. Right? And I said to him, well, and he said, but the formula is that the jet should not cost you more than 10% of your net worth. So I said, well, I can't ask him how much is he worth, right? But I have a little sideways way like financial advisors do or whatever. And I said, well, how much does that cost? And he said, well, $40 million. So calculate, right? 400 million, got to have $400 million, you buy the $40 million jet. I said, oh, so then you'll be happy. That's enough. He says, yeah. Do you think I believed him for a minute? What would he do then? You know what he would do then? He would scale it back. He bought a house in Japan and a house in, where's the other one? I think in Macau. Like that. Because it doesn't stop. And then what happens also is you can get depressed because it's not working. What happens when the jet doesn't work anymore? Like everything. Do you notice like when you buy a new car or something like that, the thrill of it, the buzz? Why doesn't that buzz last? It's the same thing with that jet. Okay, so did I address your question, or you want to? Yeah, it just doesn't work. And if we really analyze the mind, we will notice that there's this kind of high, and it always comes down again. So when it comes down again, just like ADD, we look to get another pleasurable experience, another buzz. I'll go back up. But, you know, you can even look at heroin, for example, as sort of being the answer to that problem. Because when you come down, you just have another fix of heroin, right? In a way, that's how it works. Or whether alcohol, or I think that's all those substances. I think that's how they become so addictive. Because the high feels so good, but then of course you don't stay there. Okay. So all of these things, the jet, the drugs, the alcohol, all of them are in the nature of dissatisfaction. This we don't know. That's the point. We have to analyze this. We have to spend a lot of time analyzing whether or not, you know, the sushi dinner is in the nature of dissatisfaction. It sounds pretty weird. But if it was satisfying, then all we need to do is get a jet, right? I can guarantee you that now I'm not saying that having material well-being is worse than not having. Of course, it's better. It's better to have resources than poverty. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think that anyone who owns a jet is more happy than the person who doesn't own a jet. Right? Anyone disagree? So if the jet, the thing, was not in the nature of dissatisfaction, it would continue to satisfy. And the jet and all these things are impermanent and changing. And the third thing is they don't even exist the way we're perceiving them. That's the big one. Okay? Which is not the purpose of this class. But so I already said the cause of distractions is we misconceive reality. Okay? We don't see, for example, you think about distractions. What kind of distractions do you feel are problematic for you? Anyone want to?
You know, it's not so much distraction. It just seems like the way it's the software running, right? So on my body's hardware, it just seems like there's software running, and it seems like this grasping at bother. So to me, enlightenment is being unbothered. So it's like whatever's going to catch me, it's what's going to grab me from the present moment. So it'll think really distressing things, and it's like, oh my God, you're right. It's like a noisy neighbor or a noisy broadcaster, and you're like, going, yeah, wow, that's really, and then, you know what I mean? Yeah. And then sometimes I call it seizures. I just get seized with just, you know, wow, this is a really wrong thing, and it's like I can't stop thinking about it. Well, it's good for refuge practice because I just have to kind of breathe and just do my best to just be with that fire till it pans out.
Okay.
Sometimes it doesn't seem it isn't, but it's not like the way you're talking about it. It just makes it seem like it's something from the outside, and there's this range, but it just seems like it's just a system.
Yeah,
it's a whole system.
I like the way you put it. It's a system, not something from outside. Well, obviously, you've experimented. You've investigated, right? Mm-hmm. So if we think of you, when did you start investigating? How long ago?
I don't know.
Roughly.
Probably a while.
Okay, let's say 15 years?
I have no idea. Just a long time.
Okay, so before you did that, right? Before you started investigating, I don't know what got you to start investigating, but that's...
Suffering.
Suffering, yeah, that's always it.
We always get that answer, right?
Yeah, it's like when you take your citizenship test. My wife's Australian, and she's finally deciding after 30 years, maybe she should become a citizen. She wants to be able to vote. So it drives her crazy that she can't vote. And so she was like, what did the United States buy? What territory did they buy from France? Louisiana. Yeah, that's what I said, Louisiana. She said, well, how do you know that? It says here Quebec, Louisiana, California, like that. And it's like, well, once you know it, you don't unknow it, right? And so it's like suffering. It's a curse. You can't go back to pleasure and enjoyment and distraction. And I mean, we try, but you know, it's hard. But what you're saying, sorry to go back to your point, is that you got a kind of this ongoing tape going around in your head, and it has a particular flavor, different flavor for you than might be for me. Bother. So avoiding bother, I like that, by the way, avoiding bother, has to,
Becoming unbothered.
the wish to become unbothered. Yeah, which you can do. Now, if you think about bother, if your mind, when we look at the mind that's bothered, that tape, that habit, where did that come from?
Well, I mean, ultimately, nothing's produced, and we're all one thing. But
Well, I don't know about that. I can't say. Just to repeat, everything's produced, and we're all one thing.
nothing's produced, and we're all.
Oh, nothing's produced. See, and I don't see things that way. But anyway,
Whatever it is, it's just some system that just maybe it's just part of being human. It's just something. It's like almost like these things are manufactured. It's just grasping.
this grasping that goes on, yeah.
Mind that's going to seize. That's just looking for opportunities to knock me out of the present moment. And it'll think in like the most provocative things. So most of the time I'm fine, but then there are mishaps in life, and then it's just like this fire of
Thought.
this fire of unpleasant, discursive thought.
I said my mind.
So, but that fire of discursive, unpleasant thought, pulls you away, right? Pulls you out of your.
It's a seizure. I call it.
It's a seizure. So that seizure,
Having a stroke.
You're seized. I'm seized.
that seizure is still because of desiring happiness,
Like whatever.
right? But if you didn't desire the pleasant feeling of the opposite of the seizure,
I'd be unbothered. Yeah.
yeah. So it all comes back to the same thing. A desired experience which seems like enjoyment. This goes on many levels. We're not at the same level as our dogs.
Don't tell my daughter.
I think they're happier. Hopefully.
Huh?
Are they happier?
I don't think so, but that's how we have to define happiness and suffering, see? So, we define this, we'll go on. The cause of distractions are the afflicted mind, 100%. Based on ignorance, your distractions, my distractions, are based on attachment or anger, or some derivative of those.
The wanting to be happy is the attachment. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, that's really
So if you have a firing mind, right, and there's no attachment, there's no unhappiness. Or if there's no anger. Anger in this case is aversion. I don't like that mind.
That a judgment too, or judgments.
Well, the judgments come from these afflicted minds. Now, these afflicted minds are not, they start off as very subtle. They're natural. They happen so fast that we can't even perceive them. We can only just perceive a group of them, a group of moments. So, in fact, the point is we do not have freedom. We do not have choice. We do not. It's unconscious or habit, whatever you want to call it. We have no control. We are not in control. This is the opposite of being human, of the human happiness, which most of us don't have. Most of us have what? We're just in this mode of being controlled. So if we had control, you would stop that mind, right?
it wouldn't bother me.
It wouldn't bother, whatever you want to say.
Like I love down your website. It's a quote of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and it just says it's just like an echo. Like is it real? Is it even real? And it's just like an echo.
Right. That's the quality of seeing it as an echo. That's the quality of an advanced meditator who sees reality. Now, who sees reality? No distractions. Does that mean nothing exists in his head or her head? No. But it's blissful because it's like space. Those things happen in space. The difference is for us and that person, that meditator, is his or her mind has like these clouds floating by. And it's really our mind is like we're in fall, we're down at La Selva Beach or in San Francisco. That's the difference. So there's no objectivity. We're under the control of that fog. The nature of the mind is clear. So don't worry. The nature of the mind is clear and pure. So don't worry. That's the point. That's our human nature. That's our God-given right. And we don't seize it. We don't live in it. The nature of the mind is clarity, purity, luminosity. Can you imagine living in that? That luminosity, that clarity is automatically balanced. It's undistracted. It sees a cheesecake and it's just like, the cheesecake is not enjoyable anymore, because the enjoyment of the clarity of the mind is so much more exalted. It's just like, when I watch my dogs, I feed them this dry food and then put some meat in it. They're so excited, right? And I say, wait, and they're like, right? Wait, they're really nicely trained. Wait. And then I walk away. See, I look back. They're still waiting, like fixated on the board, right? Yeah. Okay. We don't do that with dog food, do we? No. So what we're so excited about, the new job, the cheesecake, the holiday we're going on, those are distractions. Those are to the meditator who's understood the clarity of his or her mind, and then even further, understanding its ultimate nature, this luminosity that is, to that person, what we're doing looks like our dog's eating dog food. Same, of course it would be. Because the pleasure, if I can use that word, the pleasure of that experience is phenomenal. And this pleasure that we look after of having a coffee with a friend that we're looking forward to for the last week, they're going, that's your level of happiness? That's what you're looking for?
Life is precious.
That's what we're doing with our life. Our life is moving from one pleasant experience to the next. And they look at us going, that's pathetic. Because you're never satisfied. Then if you have to go to the next, and you got to go to the next, and you got to go to the next. Why? That is distraction. Because it comes from a misbelief. So, if I really had a belief, a clear perception that when I look on Facebook, it doesn't bring me any happiness. When a text pops up and the clarity of my mind is such that I just see what it is. It's just data. It's just, it's color and shape and pixels. It doesn't have any inherent meaning, does it? Meet me at 2 o'clock. And you were hoping it was going to be 1 o'clock because you're really hungry. And you say, oh God, maybe I can get him to come at 1. It's because we believe what we're seeing has all this. It's nothing. It's nothing until we make it something. Right? Actually. That's distraction. We make things into things. And we put value on them, and that's where distraction comes from. So we don't have contentment if we have to keep doing that. Correct? Right? And we don't have control. And we're driven around like a bull with a ring in its nose. I'll go here, I'll go there, I'll do this, I'll do that. We're never stopping. Okay. The good news. Finally. The whole answer is training the mind, because as you've been telling me, it's this kind of habit thing, right? The reason we don't stay there is because our mind isn't trained. It actually is trained. It's trained to do the other thing. It's trained to seek after all these things, thinking it's going to make me happy. And we don't say, oh, it will make me happy, right? We don't. It's not like that. But we think it's going to make us feel good. And we're looking to feel good, not feel bad. The moment we feel bad, we move away from it. Okay? The mind can be trained. And that's the whole issue of what we're looking for. It won't train itself. Your dog won't train itself. Okay? It has to be trained. And why would... So this is another thing I think in school we need to tell our kids from early age, that emotional, mental clarity, mental balance is a really fantastic, happy state of mind. If we educate our kids there, right, instead of educating them that your happiness is going to come, you got to get good grades, because if you get good grades, you can go to college, and you got to go to college to get a good job, and to get a good job, you have to go to get a master's degree too, or a graduate degree, because a good job means you're going to be happy. Something like that. By the way, I'm not advocating having bad jobs. I'm talking about the message. That's not where happiness comes from. Where happiness is going to come for our children and all of us is from a healthy state of mind. And even in a mind that could awaken and can be free. So and by the way, so these positive emotions, the reason they're not more predominant is because we're distracted. And the reason we're distracted is because the afflictive emotions are more dominant, because we allow them to be. We allow them to be, actually. And there's people don't like hearing this, but the answer to that is that's why an ethical lifestyle is a happier lifestyle. And we've been all about, throw out ethics, or morality, or not all of us, but that's kind of how this this recent times have now been more about questioning ethics because it's imposed rules. We don't mean it that way. We mean it simply as a means that the mind is happier. So, for example, if you don't, I don't know, did people used to get high on the weekends a lot more when they were younger, or get drunk and stuff like that and go party than you do now? Why? That's ethics. Okay? That's ethics. The reason you don't is because it's a behavior that doesn't make you happy. So ethics is all. If the ethics is not helping you develop a more balanced mind, then it's not really ethics, probably. In this context, I mean. Okay? If ethics aren't if the behavior is not beneficial, let's put it that way. Okay? So if you want to if you want to develop mental balance, all of us, we have to start looking at the idea of ethics. Okay? And when the afflicted emotions are not so dominant, the positive emotions will arise. Positive emotions have balance, warmth and affection, wisdom, empathy and compassion, serenity, enthusiasm, self-awareness. If you take these and you read these and go, wow, that'd be nice. Okay, then we understand that that's the answer, that's the description of happiness. Right? Could we accept that? It'd be much better to be serene than whatever the opposite is, disturbed. It'd be much better to be enthusiastic than to be depressed. It'd be much happier to... Self-awareness might be a more happier place than, what's the opposite of self-awareness? Confusion? Ignorance? Empathy and compassion? It'd be amazing to be... I'd like to be more compassionate. So the reason I'm not more is because the other things are operating still. And as they reduce, these become bigger. That's why some people are more compassionate than other people. It's not like we're all the same. Okay. Oh, this is early in my. So I just want to point out that it is possible to have sustained attention. We do have it. They've done research on musicians and mathematicians. These high-level mathematicians, high-level musicians, high-level athletes, scientists, and philosophers. They have a less distracted mind, at least when they're involved in those disciplines. It's really interesting that their minds have a level of focus that is not normal. Not normal meaning for the rest of us. So just drawing a parallel with those, and that focus. I was thinking about. You sometimes hear about someone being in the zone. I think that focus and in the zone are related. Yes.
Do they come in with that?
Huh?
They come in with that ability.
They come in with that ability. Yeah. Come in from where?
Mom and dad.
So mom and dad had it.
I don't know. You'll have to ask mom and dad.
I already know. I don't have to ask mom.
Probably somewhere.
Well, it has to be somewhere because
In
it's
the gene pool,
in the gene pool.
I think. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, I don't. But I like being provocative. So is there mental state? This is a mental state they have, right?
It's that ability. It's a talent.
Yeah, that talent is a
But then
mental.
they lose in other ways.
Right, but that talent is a mental quality, right? Isn't it? So I have a question for you. So what we call the definition of mind is that it's formless, right? It's formless. It's not atomic, not molecular. Can something non-molecular be produced by something that's molecular? Think about it. Can something that's form, meaning genes, because they're molecular, produce something that has no form? Is that possible or not? Scientifically.
I don't know, because they allow it to flow through. Maybe they can't not be what it is they do. So I don't know.
But you were saying it comes from the mom and dad, right? Their genes. Right. And genes are physical, right?
I see parents and their abilities. And
no, but I know. But the genes are I'm going back to the cause. Right. So is the mind physical or formless or form?
No, I think the brain is physical.
I didn't say brain. The mind.
No, but I don't think it is.
Okay. So you don't think, I agree with you. The mind is not something physical. It's not something form. So something that's formless, like a talent, is part of the mind, right? That's formless. Can it be produced by something that's form, such as genes?
I don't know. I don't know.
Think about it. Right. So I'm leaving you with that, okay? The next time we meet, you're gonna tell me your answer.
My afflictive emotions are jumping in.
You get where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Think about that. Yeah. So now we're going to go to this part. Why we don't have these things in dominance is because we don't have the mental training. We have the potential for this. See, that's what's beautiful. My dog does not actually have the potential for this. That's part of being an animal. Because I tell my dog every day, they're my kids' dogs actually, but I tell them every day, just meditate on the breath for 10 minutes, okay? And they never do it. I don't really tell them, but because I don't know it doesn't do any good. Isn't that interesting? But you can tell a person. I mean, potentially, you could, a person can do that. Potentially, animals can't do it, as far as we know. Okay, that's part about the problem of being an animal. Okay, so if we make the decision to train our minds, then in the Buddhist tradition, the ultimate, so to train the mind is from distractions means to become focused. Could we accept that? The opposite of distracted mind is a focused mind? We okay with that? Well, to develop in the Buddhist language, there is the goal of developing what we call calm abiding. Calm abiding goes through, to develop this, there's 9 stages. You go through 9 stages. Don't worry about that. But the 9 stages means, you get more and more, you get better and better at focusing. To a certain point, you can focus all you want without distraction. That's called calm abiding. Okay? Now, how do you develop that? Well, you develop it through introspection and mindfulness. The two together. We've heard a lot about mindfulness these days. It's like the new yoga, isn't it? Yeah. But the mindfulness that you're hearing about, for the most part, is not mindfulness. Mindfulness, this concept, it could be from the Hindu tradition as well, but I don't know enough about that. But it comes from the Buddhist tradition. It comes from Buddhist psychology. It comes from Buddhist philosophy. It comes from the Buddha almost 2,600 years ago. Okay, so this was named and coined a long time before whoever the latest people are promoting it, which is good. They're taking from that and using it to definitely improve people's state of mind. Okay, but for me, because I'm sort of this traditionalist, I want you to know that what often is being promoted and trained is not really. It's good, but it's not what we're really after. Okay, because what's being trained or taught often is kind of this sort of bare awareness, and that's not mindfulness. That's a part of mindfulness. And the problem with it is it doesn't last. It doesn't get rid of you can get less distracted and more calm, for sure. But there's more to it than that. Because if you're just doing bare awareness, chances are your anger and things like that will come back, almost as strongly. It can't prevent that. It doesn't get rid of your anger. It doesn't get rid of your attachment. It doesn't get rid of your jealousy. So that's okay. People might not want to get rid of those things. They just want to get calmer. That's fine. But here we're talking about getting rid of them. Okay? So it's a different process. It's a more comprehensive process. So when we talk about intention, it's important to understand that to go into this practice, this commitment to develop happiness, a happy mind, is understanding what real happiness is. It's begin to say, wow, it's really not. It doesn't mean you give up your job. It doesn't mean you don't get your MBA. It doesn't mean you don't go see your children. It doesn't mean you stop playing golf. It doesn't mean, you don't have coffee with your friends. It doesn't mean that. It means you're committed to doing all those things with more awareness. It means doing all those things with less distraction. It means, I know golf is not going to make me happy. I'm not going to grasp at it. People grasp at golf that makes them happy. So then they're playing once a week, then they're playing twice a week, then they're playing 3 times a week, 4 times a week, 5 times. You know what I mean? And then when they're not, they're watching on TV. That's just one metaphor. We could talk about anything. Okay? That we're giving up that commitment. That's where my happiness is. So the intention to practice this mindfulness and calm abiding is with that intention. Which means a commitment to standing up to distractions. Okay? It's really interesting when you start thinking of it this way. That's what a spiritual practice is. Not just because we meditate, it's a spiritual practice. It's not it. Meditating doesn't mean it's a spiritual practice. Meditating with this intention makes it a spiritual practice. You have to have these two things. Okay? And that takes study, by the way. It's really interesting when you start thinking about and understand what is real happiness. I'm still studying that. What is real happiness? And it becomes more and more subtle for me. Okay? And commitment to standing up to distractions. Well, where do distractions come from? And then what's today's distraction is not tomorrow's distraction. Well, where did that come from? How do I deal with that one? Maybe before I was distracted by my career, now I'm distracted by, all the business I'm losing. Right? Or maybe I'm distracted by, wanting to move to another place and selling my house. Okay? So you can do all those things, but are they distractions? So calm abiding, just so you know what the goal is the ability to naturally remain on an object without interruption for as long as one wishes and with perfect clarity. Okay? A lot of times with just mindfulness, with just mindfulness practice, it's about remaining on an object for as long as one wishes. It's not the perfect clarity part. Do you think that's possible to do this? Why aren't there more of our colleagues and friends who can do that? I mean, it's hard to meet someone who can do that, huh? Have you ever met anyone that can do that?
A teacher,
Who was it?
Emily. Emily, she teach calm abiding.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So it's rare though, right? Yeah. Shouldn't that be more, not normal, but it should be more prevalent? We're not teaching our kids much of this, are we? It's a little bit now in schools, some schools. Which is great. So calm abiding is an employment of mindfulness and introspection. So remember that. That word introspection is there. Okay. Mindfulness prevents excitement by not letting the mind stray from its object. Introspection is being cognizant of the mind being excited or becoming excited. Okay? So you were talking before about you're cognizant of the mind getting kind of excited, but you can't kind of do anything about it. Okay? And then the mindfulness is about not straying. So all that stuff could be happening, but like you said before, not getting attached to it. That would be the straying from it. So it could be, mindfulness would be, prevents the excitement by not letting the mind stray from its object. So the mindfulness part, if you develop that, so let's say your object is the breath, right? So all that stuff starts happening. The mindfulness keeps you on the breath, and that stuff blows around in the background. It doesn't distract you. You're not following the thoughts.
It's a process.
Yeah.
So there's a raging forest fire, so I can get to my breath, feeling my mantra in my heart.
Right.
The fire's raging, but it's like I'm pinching myself, and then slowly, I stop.
Right, but even with this, you get even more refined, where you just stay on your object of focus.
Well, I definitely use that to shift from that.
But in this developing calm abiding, you have to stay on that, and all these other things are trying to take you away.
I think I should say, if you're really on that, this fire won't disturb you. It won't happen.
Yeah. It's like the fire won't disturb you. I'm looking, that's true. But what I'm trying to say is the fire's coming up, and you're constantly in a position, constantly recalibrating your focus.
Had I been in calm abiding, I may not have.
Well,
Attention might not have been distracted by that.
when you're in calm abiding, actually, those things don't come up. Remember I said there's 9 stages. We're at the very first stage. It's hard to get even past the second stage. Second stage is like where you can stay on your object for like an hour. No, I think 108 breaths. So if we can't stay on our object for 108 breaths, we're not even at the second of the 9 stages yet. It takes a lot of work, a lot of time to develop this calm abiding. Calm abiding is the 10th stage, where the sign of attaining this single point of concentration is you can stay on an object for 4 hours without the mind moving off. Yeah.
So I have to be willing to give up excitement, knowing that maybe there's something else that's better.
That's right. Willingness to give up excitement, knowing that there's something better. Well, the reason we're excited is because we think that's what's best. We get excited about seeing our kids. We get excited about a new car. We get excited about whatever. It doesn't matter. In our minds, we have excitement. Excitement and laxity are the two problems in meditation.
What was the second one?
Laxity or lethargy. Yeah, kind of a dullness, yeah. Too loose. Excitement is when too tight. Sometimes the mind is too tight. So I'm going to we just got a few minutes. I'm going to jump ahead because there's a lot more to discuss, but I'm not going to take you through it. So there is I want to introduce this simple calm abiding practice that was shared with me from my friends at the Potential Project. They called it the ABCD method. I added an E to it, my own little, got a fiddle, right? And we're not going to go into this in the whole depth, but I want to introduce the ABCD. The E we're probably going to leave for now. So, sorry about the slides. This is just so people can remember. So this is a practice where you can start to develop a simple mindfulness practice. Now, mindfulness, in this, remember I said mindfulness, introspection. This doesn't really have so much. It has a little bit of the introspection, but this practice can definitely take you through the first 4 stages of developing single-pointed concentration, developing calm abiding. So 4 is pretty good. After that, you can come back and I'll tell you the others, because that might take years. Okay, it can take months. It depends on the person. So the first thing you want to do is you want to check your anatomy. Is the anatomy part. Okay, that has to do with your body. So we're talking about a grounded balance. So you don't have to sit in a cross-legged, just as long as you're sitting in a chair, legs. If you're in a chair, for example, your back. So you can even do it lying down on your back, but the tendency is to fall asleep. So you got to prevent that. Main thing is that you have a grounded balance. Your feet are flat on the floor. Main 100% thing, most important thing is that the back is straight from the crown to the coccyx. Okay, so the one in a straight line, but not rigid, not like that. Just straight, relaxed. Okay, that's whether you're in a chair or driving your car or whatever. Your neck is relaxed, your shoulders on. So you check in with your body and see if there's any tension. Okay, this is all around anatomy, A, B, C, D. And then hands are resting on your lap or on your knees. Okay, so, and eyes are shut gently or just partly open. Okay, so that's the A. B has to do with breathing. So this is a breathing practice. Okay, your focus is on the breath. And the breath is the anchor of your attention. Okay, so it's your anchor, means it's your focus. You can focus on the movements of the abdomen and belly, or you can focus on the sensation at the nostrils. So that's your object of focus. It's a neutral observation, like when you're watching TV, or sometimes, like I say, if you're in a high building and you're looking down at the traffic down below going around, you're looking at a very neutral attitude. That's all. You're not trying to control the breath. You're not trying to change it. You're not manipulating. You're just an observer. So if it's shallow, it's shallow. If it's deep, whatever. Okay? Now, this one is, it says counting. Okay? So ABC. C stands for counting. And remember, this is kind of like a beginning practice. So you count the breaths. Okay, in this practice. You count them. Okay? And what you're doing is you count each out breath. Okay, so 1, 2. And you breathe through the nostrils as long as you can. If you're blocked up, you can't do anything about it. But okay, 3, 4, 5, like that, right? And you count to 10, and then you go backwards. You go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then you do another, and you start again. Do 10. And if you can do 3 rounds, it'll probably take you about 6 or 7 minutes alone. That's good enough. Now I want to make something clear. There's a D to this. Okay? Start again if you lose count, by the way. That's the thing. Now it doesn't mean start again if you get distracted. Because distraction is part of the meditation. I'll explain in a minute. You only have to start again if you lose count. Because then you're really out there somewhere. Okay? Now the D has to do with distractions. The mind will be distracted. And what it gets distracted from is they'll constantly try and capture your attention. So you'll be doing breath, and then the thought that, I have to text my daughter because she was going to leave today for somewhere. That's just a distraction, right? Okay, that's going to happen. And it's going to try and capture my attention. Okay? And there's 6 sources of distractions. Okay, what are the 6 sources, do you think? Any guesses? It has to do with the 5 senses. So the sounds will try to distract you. Smells will try and distract you. Tastes will try and distract you. Sights will try and distract you. And the 6th one is mental stuff will try and distract, like thoughts and images and dreams and fantasies, daydreams, fears, worries, even excitement. Okay, those are all distractions. Realizing that you were distracted is the job here. You are a success. So when you're doing this 1, 2, 3, 4, and doing the counting, and then your mind starts thinking about the project you have to deliver, and you catch it, that's the success. You're doing the meditation. Okay? Hence the D. Gently let go of the distraction and return to the breathing. I think it's helpful, so you don't go too much into the distraction, is to say distraction or something like that. Just one word. Because it can get very tricky. Because, the distraction comes into the mind and you say distraction, then the next one comes into the mind of an image of, your mother handing you some cookies. And then what happens is like this. You go, oh, I wonder where that came from. Right? That's a distraction. Don't do that. You're not allowed at this point to do. That's an E. You're not allowed to do that now. All you can do, again, you have to say, oh, distraction. And later on, also, what you can do is you can do just, and this is a little trickier because you can say anger, you can say attachment, or you can say aversion, attraction. Aversion, attraction. But that'll probably distract you, so right now just say distraction. Okay? That's it, I think. No. The training is a continuous movement between the breath and distractions, okay? That's the job. So it's not like distractions are you're doing something wrong. You're doing it right if you're catching that you're going between the breath and distractions, okay? This is simple, but very powerful exercise. You can do this in your car, just don't close your eyes. You can do this at work, just don't. Yeah. Okay? You don't have to be doing, and this, if you do those 3 rounds, now, if you want, after you do this, people doing this for a while, like a week or 2, then what you can do is you can add 3 minutes at the end where you don't count. Okay? You just watch, and in fact, when you get good at this, you can give up the counting. Just go by the clock, right? 6 or 7 minutes. Don't do it too long. End it before you want to. Okay? Because then you'll want to come back. So if you find that one day you can only do 1 round, do 1 round. That's all. Okay, I think that's it. That's after 9.
There's a quick question.
Yeah. Quick question.
Quick question is,
Hello, good evening. My question is, could you recommend a book on meditation, Buddhism, and relaxation as it is applied in the environment of being a university student? It's from someone, maybe from, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Can you repeat? I'll repeat it. Can you say it slower?
Absolutely. Hello, good evening.
Hello, good evening.
My question is, could you recommend a book
can I recommend a book
on meditation,
Buddhism,
and relaxation as applied in the environment of being a university student?
as applied in being in the environment of a university student? I don't think it matters being a university student, for one thing. We're all in some sort of situation. I don't think that would matter. That's a good, I'm trying to think of just a really easily accessible book. Maybe what they could do, I can't think of that book. Do you know one that?
Maybe, how about Sanjay Kakra's How to Meditate?
Yeah, I was thinking there's a book called How to Meditate. That's probably the easiest one, yeah. How to Meditate by Kathleen McDonald. And that's available through Wisdom Publications.
Venerable Tupten Children's.
And then there's another one by Tupten Chudren, Chodren, Tupten, Thubten. Huh? Oh, and Chudron, sorry, 2 O's?
No, CHODRON.
Yeah, CHODRON, Tupten, THUBTEN, Chudren. And the name of her book is
Guided Meditations.
Guided Meditations.
On the Stages of the Path.
On the Stages of the Path. Now, this is a little different.
There's a CD that comes with it.
There's a CD that goes with it. But the reason I was hesitating a little bit is that what we're talking about in this class just tonight is very introductory. Remember I said there's an E to this, which stands for inquiry. And in this Tibetan Mahayana Buddhist tradition, we don't actually focus on this ABC method without the E. So we're adding what we call analytical meditations or inquiries. So Tupten Chudren's book and both these books will introduce you to those different kinds of analytical meditations. They're done in conjunction with calm abiding meditations. So I want to explain that, but I wasn't covering that in this class. Okay? Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. And see you May 13th. Is that what day of the week is that?
It's Thursday.
Thursday, good, yeah. Okay, Thursday, May 13th, and the topic will be, we don't know.
Actually, I'm sorry, it's May 10th.
May 10th.
May 10th, Thursday.
Thursday, May 10th. I don't know the topic. It might be a little bit around distractions. But I would like people to write in and request what topics they would like. That works best for me, okay? Okay, good night. Thank you. Thank you.